Well, good morning, my faithful followers. I've been falling a little bit behind making my Psalms devotional videos here. Just last few weeks and all the craziness, just a lot of unexpected things have come up. And so I'm going to try to get caught up here. I'm going to try to crank out a few of these in the next few days. We'll see what happens here. But today we're looking at Psalm 9. So here it is. Psalm 9 says this: I will praise you, Lord, with all my heart. I will tell of all the marvelous things you have done. I will be filled with joy because of you. I will sing praise to your name, O Most High. My enemies retreated. They staggered and died when you appeared, for you have judged in my favor. From your throne you have judged with fairness. You have rebuked the nations and destroyed the wicked. You have erased their names forever. The enemy is finished in endless ruins. The cities you uprooted are now forgotten, but the Lord reigns forever, executing judgment from his throne. He will judge the world with justice and rule the nations with fairness. The Lord is a shelter for the oppressed, a refuge in times of trouble. Those who know your name trust in you, for you, O Lord, do not abandon those who search for you. Sing praises to the Lord who reigns in Jerusalem. Tell the world about his unforgettable deeds. For he who avenges murder cares for the helpless. He does not ignore the cries of those who suffer. Lord, have mercy on us. See how many enemies torment me. Snatch me back from the jaws of death. Save me so I can praise you publicly at Jerusalem's gates, so I can rejoice that you have rescued me. The nations have fallen into the pit they dug for themselves. Their own feet have been caught in the trap they set. The Lord is known for his justice. The wicked are trapped by their own deeds. The wicked will go down to the grave. This is the fate of all the nations who ignore God. But the needy will not be ignored forever. The hopes of the poor will not always be crushed. Arise, O Lord, do not let mere mortals defy you. Judge the nations. Make them tremble in fear, O Lord. Let the nations know they are merely human. I think if there's one lesson we could learn from this psalm, is the way that this psalm opens up. It discusses a lot of different ideas as it goes on, but the way this song opens up, it starts off with, I will praise you. And I think if there's one thing we could learn or take away from this, is that we need to begin with worship. Everything, every day should begin with worship. We should get up as we wake up and before we get going, acknowledge that God is in control and our lives are meant to please him. And when we please him, he will bring the rest of it together. It doesn't mean we won't have difficulties, but he will bring about things in their order, their proper order. He will direct our steps. He will give us purpose and fulfillment in our life. We begin with worship. I think is one of the most important things we see in the psalm. Worship sets your perspective. It guides your approach to life. Do you approach life with fear and caution? Very relevant question for the situation we're facing in our world today. And very easy right now to be approaching our life in a more fearful and cautious approach. Or do you approach life with confidence and faith? And probably comes down to how consistent and committed are you in your worship. Nothing going on in our world today. Nothing going on in our world today has taken God by surprise. So is our confidence in him? If our confidence is in him, we shouldn't be caught up in worry. Now, that doesn't mean we're not going to feel feelings of fear and uncertainty. But do those feelings ultimately guide our steps, and do they set the tone in our life, or does faith set the tone in our life? Verse 1 also says, I will tell of the marvelous things you have done. And I think this is just a reminder that our stories have power. That's why, knowing your testimony and regularly sharing testimonies of what God has done and is doing in your life with your friends, your neighbors, is so important. Stories of God's goodness motivate us to stand strong in our faith. They build us up. It's important to be sharing our testimonies of what God is doing. When we remember what God has already brought us through, we become more confident that He's going to bring us through what we're facing today. Verse number 3 says that my enemies have retreated. And what he's doing here is he's reflecting on his past victories where he's seen God come through for him, where he's been in situations where he's been in danger and God has come through in miraculous ways. And so he's reflecting on those things, reminding himself that God is going to do it again. He's reflecting on sicknesses that have been overcome, that relationships that have been, seemed hopeless, but then they've been restored. Where he's been in times of need and God has provided. And this is what he's doing. He's reflecting on this. And it's ultimately because he does this that builds the confidence he has later in the chapter of knowing that God will do it again. Verse 5 says, you've destroyed the wicked and you've erased their names forever. And this is maybe a statement of faith. Maybe this psalmist hasn't entirely seen this happen, but he knows that eventually these things are going to come to pass. As we understand, eventually all evil will be destroyed, but the accomplishments of the righteous will live on. I mean, think about it. Hitler, one of the most powerful men in history, at least for a window of time during his lifetime. But his ideas today, for the most part, are condemned, and his accomplishments, the things he has accomplished, for the most part, lost because we look back and what he did was evil. But take somebody like William Wilberforce, by no means, a name that many of us know today. He was highly influential in ultimately abolishing slavery in the UK. By no means is he as well known a household name as Hitler. But his accomplishments live on forever. For the most parts, developed nations have agree that slavery is a terrible thing. And just it's an example. Eventually the wicked are destroyed, but the accomplishments of the righteous live on forever. In verses 8 through 19, I can't break down every verse in these shorter videos, but it talks about God's justice, and God will eventually set everything right. And I know it's a promise we keep revisiting in the Psalms and we'll continue to revisit, but it's the promise that really brings our faith together. If this is at the heart of everything, we endure today because we know that eventually God will set everything right. And so we press on to do what's right and to bring about His justice in our world, knowing that justice is eventually going to win, no matter how evil and terrible things are. Evil is not going to have the final word. The cross has the final word, a song that we sing frequently. Evil people will be judged for their wickedness. The weak will be given shelter. All who search for God eventually will find Him. The Psalms are filled with hope, and I really hope that you all, especially our people of Hilltop, that you're following along with these videos, because I think in this time, hope is so important. I just happen to be actually wearing a Superman shirt, and in the greatest movie ever made, The Man of Steel, people asked what the symbol on his chest meant, and he said, to us, it looks like an S. Where he comes from, it's a symbol of hope. That's one of the things I just love about Superman, because Superman's just awesome. But he gives hope to people that evil can never defeat him, and ultimately that's what we know in Scripture. Evil will never win out. The Psalms are filled with hope. Our faith's foundations are rooted in hope. It's our hope that everything will eventually be made right, and this gives meaning to our faith. Our faith has no meaning if we aren't sure if we win in the end. Because of that, we endure a fallen world that will always be full of injustice, or it will be full of injustice until Christ's return, but then justice will win forever. One thing I mentioned, it was a couple weeks ago now in one of my in my message on Sunday morning, was that God uses times like this as a wake-up call. And one thing I think we're really being reminded of these days is our human frailty and weakness. And that's a good thing, because when we're reminded of our weakness, we are reminded that we need to draw closer to God and depend on Him. And the Psalms are a constant reminder, I believe, of how truly desperate we are for God. When we forget that we're desperate for Him, our lives become quickly imbalanced, and we start chasing other things. In reality, other gods, things that steal our attention, our time, our energy, our focus, our commitment, our dedication. We start giving those things to other things. What those things really are is they're other gods. We give them what truly belongs to God. And when that happens, our lives become imbalanced. And ultimately it's to our detriment. And I believe God allows things like this to remind us that we are desperate for Him. Whether we feel it or not, we're desperate for Him, and we need to stay in that attitude of desperation for Him, even when things are going well. Anyway, I hope this was a good, challenging word for you today. I hope it was an encouraging word. And I'll be back hopefully soon with more of these Psalm videos. Have a great day.